If you are hearing this right now, understand something with absolute clarity. You did not arrive at this message by accident. Your presence in this moment is divinely orchestrated. Heaven does not waste timing, and it does not misalign appointments. You are standing at a threshold, a spiritual intersection where what has been delayed begins to reverse, where what has been withheld begins to open, where what has been contested begins to transfer. There is a supernatural reversal unfolding over your life. What looked like warfare was positioning. What felt like isolation was fortification. What resembled betrayal was filtration. You were not being punished, you were being prepared. Isaiah declared that no weapon formed against you shall prosper, and that promise was not poetic exaggeration, it was prophetic architecture. The weapons formed, yes. The whispers circulated, yes. The alliances gathered, yes. But prosper? They did not. They could not. This message is not merely information, it is activation. It is an atmospheric shift. So breathe, steady your spirit, allow your nervous system to settle. Because what you are about to understand will reframe every jealous look, every cold shoulder, every silent room that shifted when you entered. Before we go further, engage with this moment. If you feel this stirring in your spirit, like this message, leave a comment declaring, "I receive it," and share it with someone who has felt targeted without cause. You are not crazy, you are marked. And as heaven pulls back the veil on what has truly been happening around you, you are going to see that jealousy was never your curse, it was your confirmation. Because what you must understand now is that jealousy has always been confirmation of calling. There comes a moment in every destiny-shaped life when heaven reveals the unseen mechanics operating behind the scenes. For you, that moment is now. The jealousy you endured was not random emotional instability from others, it was a reaction to spiritual weight. When you carry something rare, it disturbs what is common. When you walk with authenticity, it agitates performance. When you operate in peace, it unsettles chaos. Jealousy is not triggered by mediocrity, it is triggered by potential. It does not rise in response to weakness, it rises in response to promise. The people who targeted you did not gather because you failed, they gathered because they sensed something forming in you that they could not manufacture in themselves. Heaven marked you, and though they lacked language for it, they felt it. Opposition is often evidence of divine marking. If you were ordinary, you would not be opposed. If you were forgettable, you would not be discussed. If you were irrelevant, you would not be targeted. The attacks grew louder because your elevation was already moving in the unseen realm. Favor does not arrive quietly when it carries generational impact. It disrupts atmospheres. It shakes insecure structures. It exposes fragile egos. And so the resistance intensified. Not to stop you, but to signal that the shift had already begun. The truth is, you were never meant to be contained. Yet for years you attempted to shrink yourself to fit rooms that were too small for your becoming. You lowered your voice to avoid intimidation. You diluted your gifts to avoid comparison. You softened your ambition to protect fragile relationships. But containment was never your assignment. You were designed to expand atmospheres, not compress yourself within them. The very thing that made others uncomfortable was the thing heaven anointed. The very presence they tried to minimize was the presence heaven intended to magnify. Jealousy was confirmation that you carried spiritual density. You were not just present, you were impactful. And impact creates reaction. There is a psychological reality here as well. Insecure systems respond defensively to disruption. When someone embodies authenticity in an environment built on performance, that authenticity functions like a mirror. People see themselves more clearly around you, and not everyone likes what they see. Your peace exposed their anxiety. Your progress exposed their stagnation. Your integrity exposed their compromise. And rather than confront their own reflection, they attempted to distort yours. But distortion cannot erase destiny. It can only delay recognition. The louder the whispers became, the closer you were to breakthrough. Because attacks often peak right before manifestation. Darkness intensifies before dawn, not because dawn is weak, but because it is inevitable. If this resonates with you right now, declare it. Type in the comments, "Jealousy confirmed my calling," not for ego, but for alignment. Words activate agreement, and agreement accelerates alignment. You are not a victim of jealousy, you are a vessel of promise. And as that promise matures, something else becomes undeniable. The atmosphere shifts around your presence, whether you intend it to or not. There are individuals who command attention through noise. You command it through gravity. You walk into a room and conversations adjust, not because you demand it, but because something in the spiritual climate recalibrates. People react before they understand why they are reacting. Some lean in, intrigued. Some withdraw, unsettled. Some grow quiet, observing. That is not coincidence. That is presence. You carry an undeniable spiritual frequency. It is not arrogance, it is alignment. When someone is anchored internally, their external presence carries coherence, and coherence is powerful. Rooms shift because stability is rare. In chaotic environments, calm feels disruptive. In insecure circles, confidence feels threatening. In competitive systems, authenticity feels dangerous. You are often misunderstood, not because you were unclear, but because others lacked spiritual eyesight. They could sense your calling, but could not comprehend it. They could feel your weight, but could not categorize it. So instead of honoring it, they resisted it. Attempts were made to silence you subtly. Opportunities evaporated when your name surfaced. Invitations cooled when your growth became visible. Friendships shifted when your elevation no longer felt theoretical. But understand this deeply. Environments that cannot celebrate your expansion will always attempt to manage it. They will suggest you are too much. They will imply you are changing. They will hint that you are different now. And you are. You are becoming who you were always meant to be. Your authenticity disrupts insecure systems because it removes the need for performance. When you do not compete, you expose competition. When you do not gossip, you expose insecurity. When you refuse to shrink, you expose fragility. You were not trying to outshine anyone. You were simply being yourself, and that was enough. The atmosphere shift around you is not about ego, it is about assignment. You are not called to blend, you are called to influence. Influence does not beg for permission, it operates through presence. And the more you embrace who you are without apology, the more polarized reactions will become. Some will align with your frequency, others will repel from it. That is not your responsibility to manage. Your responsibility is to remain anchored. Because when you carry something rare, not everyone will know how to steward proximity to you. And that is why jealousy surfaced. Not to destroy you, but to distinguish you. Not to bury you, but to brand you. Not to diminish you, but to demonstrate that what is anointed cannot be contained. And as you begin to recognize that the shift around your life was never random, you must now understand why jealousy rarely moves alone, and why insecurity almost always seeks reinforcement before it strikes. Because insecurity by itself feels fragile, but when it gathers into agreement, it feels emboldened. And this is why jealousy gathers in groups. Very few people have the courage to confront someone who carries authentic spiritual authority one-on-one. Individually, they feel the weight of what you carry, and it unsettles them. But when they find others who share the same discomfort, their insecurity begins to feel validated. Conversations begin quietly, observations are exchanged, interpretations are distorted. What one person feels privately becomes amplified collectively, and what begins as confusion morphs into competition. Group sabotage is not a sign of strength, it is evidence of shared weakness. The insecure need numbers because individually they lack conviction. They whisper in corners because they cannot speak boldly in the open. They align not around truth, but around shared resentment. But here is the deeper spiritual law at work. When jealousy organizes, it unintentionally constructs the architecture of its own collapse. Their plotting becomes exposure, Their alliances become documentation. Their coordination becomes evidence. What they thought was strategic sabotage becomes a record of insecurity. Because jealousy is not triggered by failure, it is triggered by potential. No one forms a coalition against someone they consider insignificant. No one expends emotional energy to undermine someone they believe is irrelevant. They sensed movement around you before you did. They felt the momentum building in your spirit. They recognized the expansion of your influence even when it was still subtle. Your authenticity exposed what they had been performing. Your integrity highlighted what they had compromised. Your consistency reflected their inconsistency. And light exposes darkness without effort. It does not argue, it illuminates. And illumination makes hidden motives visible. The very presence you carried forced internal questions inside of them that they were not prepared to answer. Instead of allowing those questions to transform them, they projected them onto you. They convinced themselves you were arrogant because you were confident. They labeled you distant because you were discerning. They called you intimidating because you were grounded. But projection cannot sustain itself forever. Eventually it collapses under its own distortion, and that collapse becomes the doorway to something else, because divine exposure and separation always follow prolonged deception. There are seasons in destiny where heaven allows masks to remain intact because you are not yet prepared for the truth. But when elevation approaches, concealment is no longer sustainable. Hidden competition within close circles begins to surface. You begin noticing inconsistencies in tone, subtle shifts in support, smiles that do not reach the eyes, compliments that carry undertones. You start sensing resistance where there once was warmth. This is not paranoia, it is perception sharpening. False supporters cannot remain hidden when your next dimension requires integrity around you. Masks slip not because you forced them off, but because heaven applied pressure. Pressure reveals structure, and some structures were built on comparison rather than covenant. The separation unfolding in your life is not random relational decay. It is divine pruning. And pruning always feels like loss before it feels like growth. A tree does not celebrate when branches are cut. It experiences removal. But removal is what allows greater fruit. Heaven performs surgery on circles when the circle becomes contaminated. Some relationships were seasonal scaffolding, necessary for one stage, but dangerous for the next. Some alliances were proximity-based, not purpose-based. And when purpose intensifies, proximity without alignment becomes a liability. Dead branches must be removed, not because they are evil, but because they are unproductive. There are people who loved the version of you that was uncertain. There are people who supported you when your ambition felt theoretical. There are people who were comfortable when your growth was limited. But as your expansion became visible, their comfort eroded. And rather than expand with you, they retreated into jealousy. Heaven does not allow elevation to coexist with contamination. The surgery may feel painful, the separation may feel lonely, but it is not loss. It is protection. Because what is coming requires a clean circle. And this is where the narrative deepens into something generational, because the transfer that has been forming around your life cannot be stewarded in a compromised environment. The transfer is not merely financial, though finances are included. It is generational breakthrough. It is influence expansion. It is authority redistribution. Elevation cannot be shared with jealous hearts, because jealousy cannot steward overflow. Jealous hearts compete with blessing rather than collaborate with it, and heaven ensures that no one falsely claims credit for what only grace produced. Closed doors were not rejection, they were insulation. Rooms that seemed to push you out were protecting you from atmospheres that would have diluted your calling. Every loss created space for alignment. Every distancing created capacity. Every ending created margin. Discernment sharpened in isolation. Clarity emerged in quiet. Divine alignment replaced forced connection. You did not lose what was meant for you. You were refined for what was meant for you. The clean circle forming around you now is not large, but it is loyal. It is not loud, but it is aligned. It is not impressed by your potential. It is invested in your purpose. Because wealth transfer without emotional maturity becomes destruction. Authority without integrity becomes corruption. Influence without discernment becomes exploitation, and heaven matured you before multiplying you. The clarity you carry now is evidence of that maturity. You no longer crave rooms that once rejected you. You no longer seek validation from voices that once doubted you. You no longer chase invitations that once withheld access. You understand that what is assigned to you cannot bypass you. And as this understanding settles, something powerful becomes evident. Jealousy is often the final indicator before breakthrough. Jealousy erupts when manifestation approaches. Resistance intensifies when elevation is already in motion. Envy senses spiritual expansion before it becomes visible. The atmosphere becomes volatile, not because you are regressing, but because you are advancing. Think about the psychological dynamic of insecurity when confronted with someone evolving. It destabilizes existing hierarchies. It disrupts familiar power structures. It threatens perceived dominance. So resistance forms as an attempt to maintain old order. But old order cannot withstand divine momentum. No alliance can cancel divine ordination. They may delay perception, but they cannot derail destiny. Opposition proves divine correctness. If you were moving in the wrong direction, resistance would feel absent. If you were settling for less, insecurity would not react. The intensity of opposition around you was confirmation that you were moving accurately. You were not being attacked because you were off track. You were being attacked because you were aligned. The chosen one is destiny in motion, and destiny in motion disrupts stagnant systems. Systems built on hierarchy tremble when authenticity enters. Structures built on insecurity fracture when confidence stabilizes. And you did not need to fight them. Your consistency was confrontation enough. Your peace was disruption enough. Your growth was resistance enough. They gathered thinking they were powerful because they had numbers. But heaven does not measure power by crowd size. It measures it by resilience under pressure. And you withstood storms that entire groups could not survive individually. You held your integrity when retaliation would have been easy. You guarded your tongue when gossip would have been tempting. You remained grounded when sabotage attempted to provoke reaction. That restraint was not weakness, it was spiritual discipline. That composure was not passivity, it was authority. And authority does not announce itself, it demonstrates itself. Now the season shifts again. What they meant as sabotage becomes spotlight. What they intended as isolation becomes distinction. What they hoped would shrink you becomes evidence of your expansion. You are not standing on the edge of collapse. You are standing at the threshold of demonstration. And demonstration does not require revenge. It requires revelation. Heaven will reveal what has been forming quietly around you. Doors will open not because you knocked louder, but because your readiness aligned. Conversations will shift, not because you argued harder, but because clarity matured. Opportunities will surface not because you chased them, but because positioning completed. Jealousy was never your curse, it was your confirmation. Exposure was never your humiliation, it was your separation. Separation was never your abandonment, it was your preparation. And preparation was never punishment, it was promotion in disguise. You are not reacting to jealousy anymore. You are rising beyond it, because when destiny moves, resistance can only delay perception, not outcome. And outcome is already written. And as the noise settles, and the separation clarifies, and the jealous alliances begin collapsing under the weight of their own insecurity, something even more profound becomes visible. You were not merely attacked, you were tested, refined, and ultimately trusted with authority. Jealousy was never just an external irritation, it was an internal examination. It revealed not only who they were, but who you were becoming. When they whispered, you could have retaliated. When they plotted, you could have exposed. When they provoked, you could have descended. But you did not. And that restraint was not weakness, it was evidence. Heaven was observing your responses more than your results. Because anyone can shine when supported. Authority is forged when opposed. You were tested not on talent, but on temperament. Not on charisma, but on character. And in every moment where retaliation would have felt justified, you chose integrity. You chose silence over slander. You chose dignity over drama. You chose composure over chaos. And those choices, invisible to many, were recorded in realms that matter most. Humility became your shield. Restraint became your weapon. Endurance became your signature. You were baptized in fire, not to destroy you, but to strengthen you. Fire does not ask permission before refining gold. It simply burns away what cannot remain. And what emerged from your fire season was not bitterness. It was clarity. Not vengeance, but vision. Not fragility, but fortitude. That is how heaven identifies who can be trusted with authority. Authority is not given to the loudest voice. It is entrusted to the most stable spirit. And your stability under pressure proved your readiness. You graduated from preparation to manifestation without ceremony, without applause, without announcement. But graduation nonetheless occurred. The weight you now carry feels different. The clarity you now hold feels sharper. The confidence you now walk in feels quieter but stronger. This is not arrogance, it is alignment. Heaven now trusts you with greater authority because you have demonstrated that you will not misuse it. You will not weaponize influence. You will not manipulate access. You will not allow ego to outrun purpose. And that trust unlocks something expansive, something multidimensional, something far beyond the surface idea of success. Because what is unfolding is not a single blessing, it is a multidimensional transfer. And this transfer is not confined to finances, though provision will be part of it. It is relational, it is spiritual, it is influential, it is generational. It is the kind of elevation that alters trajectory, not just circumstances. Authority, voice, and presence will increase in weight. Conversations that once dismissed you will now defer to you. Rooms that once overlooked you will now seek you. Opportunities will align, not because you chased them, but because your alignment attracts them. Divine connections will begin replacing toxic alliances. You will notice the difference immediately. There will be no undercurrent of competition, no subtle undermining, no hidden agendas. There will be collaboration, celebration, and clarity. Favor will open doors you did not knock on. Invitations will arrive without manipulation. Access will be granted without begging. Because when heaven orchestrates elevation, it does not require human scrambling. It requires spiritual readiness. Wealth will come not merely to elevate your lifestyle, but to expand your stewardship. This is where maturity matters. Wealth without stewardship becomes destruction, but stewardship transforms wealth into legacy. The resources coming toward you are not for indulgence alone. They are for impact, for generational shift, for building what was once only whispered in prayer. You are becoming a distribution center of blessing. Overflow will move through you, not stop at you. The compassion forged in isolation will guide how you steward influence. The humility forged in testing will guide how you handle visibility. The discernment sharpened in betrayal will guide how you choose proximity. This is the architecture of multidimensional transfer. It is not random. It is earned through endurance and refined through resistance. And yet, there remains one final key that determines whether the transfer flows freely or becomes obstructed. That key is forgiveness. Forgiveness is not a sentimental concept, it is structural. Bitterness contaminates elevation because resentment anchors you to the very season you are leaving. You cannot carry old wounds into new dimensions without compromising clarity. Forgiveness does not excuse what was done. It does not minimize betrayal. It does not erase memory. It simply releases ownership of revenge. It releases the debt from your emotional ledger and hands it to heaven. Forgiveness does not equal reconciliation. Access is not automatic. Trust is not immediate, but freedom is. Releasing resentment restores personal power. When you forgive, you remove the emotional tether connecting you to their actions. You stop rehearsing conversations that already ended. You stop allowing their choices to dictate your peace. You take back internal territory. Heaven handles consequences for adversaries. You are not responsible for balancing cosmic justice. Your responsibility is alignment. Your responsibility is healing. Your responsibility is maintaining the clarity required for the next level. Forgiveness clears internal space for overflow. Without it, blessing becomes burden. With it, blessing becomes expansion. You forgive not because they deserve it, but because you deserve forward momentum, unburdened by backward emotion. And as forgiveness settles, something remarkable becomes undeniable. Destiny has been confirmed and elevation activated. The jealous group's downfall is not your celebration. It is your confirmation. It confirms that divine protection was active even when invisible. It confirms that sabotage cannot outrun sovereignty. It confirms that what was meant to contain you instead revealed you. The transfer has already begun. You can feel it in subtle shifts, in conversations that feel different, in opportunities that feel aligned, in peace that feels anchored. Restoration is not approaching, it is unfolding. Acceleration is not hypothetical, it is manifesting. Divine overflow is not poetic language, it is experiential reality. Step forward with confidence, but also with reverence. Elevation requires both boldness and humility. Walk into new rooms without shrinking. Speak with clarity without arrogance. Receive favor without guilt. Steward influence without insecurity. Comment below if this resonates, because agreement strengthens alignment. Share this message with someone who has mistaken jealousy for failure. Subscribe so you remain connected to the unfolding revelation of your own journey. You were always chosen, always protected, always set apart. Nothing that gathered against you changed that. It only clarified it. The fire refined you. The jealousy distinguished you. The separation aligned you. The forgiveness freed you. And now elevation meets you. Together, we rise toward the light.